Europe to the rest of the world, wherever you are. Maybe some organizational issues at the beginning. Please make sure that your name and your organization are shown below the picture or the black screen you're sharing with us. And give us another couple of minutes because I still see that some people are attending. Okay, I think we are complete. We are a bit less than yesterday, so I see also a couple of new names. So again, a very warm welcome from us on the second day of the workshop on tourism monitoring in Antarctica. Second day, we are going to deal with monitoring possibilities via ships. And this is the program for today. I think as we are only 30 people at the moment, I'm again not splitting into different groups in the discussion, but we will start basically with a short recap of yesterday. Then we are getting a quite interesting keynote on the use of citizen science project for monitoring from Annette Bombusch, the Polar Citizen Science Collective. She is sharing with us experiences from practical examples, and there is also the possibility to ask questions. Then we have a brief introduction into the discussion group, which then will last for about an hour. And then, yeah, we have some closing remarks. Many thanks for attending today, and many thanks also to those of you who have sent us, as a follow-up of yesterday, a couple of comments or interesting reports. For those of you who have not been so far able to join yesterday, we have the recording of yesterday already online on the website, so that can be viewed. Yeah, the discussion yesterday was supposed to be organized along the question what monitoring can be done from distance. At the end, we ended up with quite some other discussion topics, nevertheless quite interesting and useful. And one of the elements that definitely needs to be changed is that we need to consider in the monitoring all visitors to Antarctica, not only the tourists. So that is some of the lessons learned from yesterday, that we have to broaden the approach and consider all of humans entering Antarctica. The other thing, and that is maybe something for today to consider, is that this research project is not trying to get or to develop new monitoring methods in general. It's more bringing together existing ones done by the various stakeholders or private engagements into a bigger picture to get an overall status overview of what's going on in Antarctica and how visitors are impacting the environment there. Another important notice, and that is something I really would like to recall, is monitoring per definition is not negative or positive. It's just there to show changes, which can be positive or negative. I can understand that most of us probably have a bit of a negative feeling when they hear monitoring, because in most cases, wherever the humans go, there are negative impacts. But in this case, at the moment, we don't have the proof for that. So it's really about developing a system that shows the changes in the environment due to visitors, if there are any. We also heard some examples yesterday of improving the environment, like for the whales, over the decades. So there is also some progress. We had a bit of a discussion yesterday also on how to establish, or is there a need of establishing a baseline. And my personal understanding of the discussion yesterday was that baseline, as we know it for other environmental monitoring programs, doesn't need to be established in the way. We are just supposed to develop a monitoring system that shows the changes and says, okay, this has changed over the last years. So it's a different type of monitoring. We probably are not able to establish targets like we have heard yesterday, which are existing for biodiversity or the Marine Strategy Framework Directive in Europe. So it's a bit of a different approach we have to consider here. We need to discuss. Rita, any additional points, or Michaela, you want to add to my recap from yesterday?
No, I think you summed it up pretty nicely, and I'm looking forward to today's discussions, and especially to our keynote. Thank you, Annette, for being here and for sharing your experiences.
Thank you for that. And in having said this, this is the next slide from my side. So I would ask Annette to stop sharing my screen, and I would like to ask Annette to start her presentation. Many thanks. You have about 45 minutes, including questions and answers. So please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, and good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to wherever you are. Thank you for joining for this talk. As said, my name is Annette Bombosch, and I'm representing the Polar Citizen Science Collective today. And I will be speaking on a very long topic here, using citizen science monitoring projects for monitoring experiences from practical examples. So to give you a short outline of this talk, I first want to explain what citizen science is, and that's important so that we're all on the same page. And then cover a little bit of the history of citizen science before we take a more detailed look at citizen science in Antarctic tourism. And then I will highlight 3 case studies where monitoring is used successfully in a citizen science context in Antarctic tourism. And I want to finish with looking at some of the limitations and also the opportunities for citizen science for monitoring purposes. So, what is citizen science? Citizen science refers to the involvement of the general public in scientific research, but it has many names. You might have heard it as citizen science, or community science, or crowdsourced science, or public participation in scientific research. But the key idea is always the same. It involves individuals or communities actively participating in scientific projects. And it is interesting that the involvement can happen at various stages. So the public can be involved right at the beginning at project design. They're mostly involved in data collection, but they can also be involved in data analysis. Overall, participation is contributing to scientific research and increases educational learning and scientific literacy of the participants. So now you might think that citizen science is a fairly new concept because we keep hearing about it more and more in just the last years, but it actually has long histories dating back several centuries to at least the middle of the 18th century. Because back in the days, science was not established as a formal profession like it is nowadays. And many scientific observations and discoveries were made by amateur experts who dedicated their free time to follow their curiosity. So if we look at this guy here, for example, Benjamin Franklin, he was a polymath. He was a printer, a writer, a statesman, a diplomat, and a founding father of the United States. But he also engaged in science. He is well known for the invention of the lightning rod and bifocal glasses, but he was also the first one to chart the Gulf Stream to help ship captains navigate it more efficiently. And then we have Thomas Jefferson, probably better known as the third president of the United States, but he also had a strong interest in meteorology. He recorded daily weather data from 1676 until 1816, resulting in a collection of over 40 years worth of data. And he was the first one to envision a network of weather observers, for which he recruited volunteers in 6 states in the United States. And then there's Florence Nightingale. She was a British nurse, and during the Crimean War, she worked at hospitals for wounded soldiers. And there she monitored the number of soldier death rates and related these to the insufficient hygiene standards. Her studies resulted in pioneering work in statistics and data visualization. Some amazing work has resulted from efforts like these. You might have heard about the Christmas bird count, which is one of the oldest citizen science projects. It has been running since 1900. And the Christmas bird count was started in North America in an effort to change another tradition, the Christmas side hunt. The side hunt was an event where locals would hunt all sorts of animals and birds they could on Christmas Day, and the team with the most kills was declared the winner. So on Christmas Day 1900, ornithologist Frank Chapman began a new tradition, a Christmas bird census, where volunteer bird watchers would count birds on Christmas Day instead of hunting them. And the Christmas bird count has evolved since then into a long-running wildlife census to assess the health of bird populations and to help guide conservation actions. And you can see the numbers of how many observers they have since they started in 1900 with 27 to now more than 75,000 observers. Citizen science has a significant growth in recent years, as you can see on the graph on the right side there, with more and more projects becoming available and more uptake by the public. So let's now take a more detailed look at citizen science in Antarctic tourism. It is difficult to say exactly when citizen science started in Antarctic tourism because operators might have engaged in citizen science without others knowing about it. So one way to get a better idea is to look at IATO, which is the International Association of Antarctica Tour Operators, which the majority of operators offering tourism in Antarctica are a part of. IATO started communicating citizen science projects in 2006, first directly to the expedition leaders, and then in later years also to the field staff via the FOM, which is the Field Operations Manual. Back then, citizen science in Antarctica was in its beginnings. There wasn't a structured way to do citizen science at that time. A challenge was to communicate project availability, and there was also little project feedback from scientists to keep everyone involved motivated. But this changed slowly over the years as scientists realized that field staff offer an excellent opportunity to collect data over wider spatial and temporal scales. It also became clear that citizen science projects were a great opportunity to enrich the Antarctic experience by providing meaningful learning opportunities. And citizen science projects started to appear that offered more structured data collection, that offered to involve guests, and that offered to provide feedback to keep field staff and all the other participants motivated. To support the structured way of sharing citizen science projects amongst the industry, 5 expedition guides got together and started the Polar Citizen Science Collective in 2017, which has since become a UK-registered charity. We all had several years of experience working in the Antarctic tourism industry. We were passionate about Antarctica, and we had been keenly involved in the citizen science projects that were supported and communicated by IATO. As the majority of us had a past or present career in science, we were also aware of all the challenges that polar scientists face, and we saw huge missed opportunities. As we all know, the polar regions are remote and challenging for anyone to get to, tourists or scientists alike. We all know that research time is limited. Once a scientist is down there, they're quite often only there for a limited amount of time within a season. And once on a trip, geographic coverage is limited because a scientist can only be at one place at one time. And overall, research in polar regions is extremely expensive. So we thought, what if we could utilize the expedition cruise vessels as platforms of opportunity for research via citizen science? This would allow to increase the spatial and coverage as multiple ships operate along a wide geographical range throughout the entire season. This would reduce costs for data collection, and it would increase science outreach, which is something that is becoming more and more important in any field of science. And what if these citizen science efforts could contribute to informed management decisions and policy change? So we at the Polar Collective, we work with various stakeholders. We work with the scientists, with operators and their field staff, and with the travelers, and we unite them all with citizen science in the polar regions. We also work with IARO, and we are endorsed by SUS, which is the Southern Ocean Observing System. So how do we do this? We collaborate with scientists to establish successful citizen science projects that are suitable for the polar tourism industry. We have a vetting process for each project, and some of the criteria we assess are, for example, the relevance to polar science, logistic feasibility, and this is actually one of the most important points for a successful citizen science project, to fit into the time and logistical constraints of an operation. We check that there's an educational component of the project because this is extremely important. And we also take a look at what feedback the project scientists offer the participants. And we also work with the project scientist to develop training for that project. We collaborate with the tour operators for a committed and successful citizen science program. Via an agreement, they commit to offering citizen science on their Antarctic voyages. We support them in finding the right projects that are suitable to their individual itineraries. And we provide project updates that the scientists share with us. And we equip the field staff to confidently facilitate data collection with guests via our online training platform. As mentioned on the previous slide, all project trainings are developed together with the project scientists so that data collection can be trusted. We also work with the travelers. Citizen science provides a perfect opportunity for science outreach. Citizen science is great for education and provides ample learning opportunities. By allowing for a two-way engagement between the public and scientists, citizen science can also lead to increased scientific literacy in the participants. And participation also enriches the travel experience, and more travelers are looking for a travel with a meaningful purpose. You might wonder if this works, so let's now have a look at a few examples where citizen science is already used successfully for monitoring purposes in Antarctica. So the first project I want to talk about is HappyWell. HappyWell is an online platform gathering marine mammal photos from citizen scientists from all over the world. Like this, HappyWell creates a powerful tool for scientists to better understand whale populations thanks to public engagement. And it's all based on photo identification. Why do you need photos? Why are they important? Well, as you can see here on this slide, all these photos of the underside of a humpback whale's fluke show that they come in all sorts of variation, from all black to all white and anything in between. What is common though amongst them is that the underside of a humpback's fluke is like a human fingerprint. It is unique to every single humpback whale. It therefore allows to identify individual whales as long as you manage to capture it on a photograph. And this is where HappyWell's story begins. Participation is super easy. HappyWell takes advantage of the fact that travelers typically bring cameras, often very good ones, on a trip. And they are also excited to photograph whales. So in a nutshell, this is how HappyWell works. You first set your camera to the local date and time and turn on a GPS if your camera has one. You capture as many shots of the underside of the fluke as you can. And then you submit all those photographs to Happy Well. In addition to being super easy to participate, Happy Well also matches all submissions against its database and emails you what they find. This can either be an email telling you that the whale that you photographed is new to science, meaning that it hasn't been recorded before and that you now added a new whale to the database, or an email telling you who your whale is. And in this case, you can then see where your whale has been spotted before or what is known about its history. So for this particular whale here, we can see that it migrates from the Antarctic Peninsula to Brazil, which is fairly unusual actually, because the majority of humpback whales from the Antarctic Peninsula travel north along the west coast of South America to areas such as Ecuador or Panama. So these email notifications make for a much more meaningful wildlife experience, as you from now on can follow the whale's future travels. And if you want to go the extra mile, you can even adopt and name a whale. Here are a few of the many examples of named whales in Happy Well. As I said, Happy Well is a global project and it has exploded over the past few years. Here you see a snapshot of all humpback whale encounters recorded in Happy Well, together with the whale's respective migration routes. So since the project started in 2015, more than 280,000 humpback whale encounters have been submitted. And also the database of users has grown from 0 in 2015 when it started to more than 20,000 users actively participating in Happy Well nowadays. Now let's look a bit closer to Antarctica. As we all know, commercial whaling in the Southern Ocean was devastating to all whale populations. It is estimated that more than 2 million whales were killed in the Southern Hemisphere, and amongst those were around 200,000 humpback whales. Since the whaling moratorium has been put in place, some whale species have shown promising signs of recovery, and amongst those species are the humpback whales. But getting data is difficult. Here, Happy Well has helped tremendously with our understanding of the increase in whale populations since the end of commercial whaling. At the beginning of Happy Well in 2015, around 700 individuals were recorded in the Antarctic humpback whale catalog, and most of those records came from scientists. And look at the numbers now. It's nearly 10 times more individuals recorded in their database. Thanks to thousands of whale flukes submitted by citizen scientists, the data has already been used to contribute to science and management. More than 30 papers have been published using Happy Well data. And in 2019, IATO operators unanimously adopted mandatory procedures to mitigate the risk of ship strikes from vessels operating in the Antarctic Peninsula region by having operators travel at a maximum of 10 knots in certain areas. This was in response to studies suggesting that humpback populations are growing and in recognition of the Antarctic Peninsula being an area of significant human activity, as increased shipping has the potential to lead to increased whale strikes. Based on data from Happy Well and the VCAP marine mammal project that Gina from IATO mentioned yesterday, the slowdown zone was expanded in time and space for the upcoming Antarctic season and covers the area that you can see in this figure here on this slide. Another project where the tourism industry has been collecting monitoring data is the Globe Cloud project. Globe Clouds is part of NASA's bigger Global Learning and Observation to Benefit the Environment program. It is a citizen science project focusing on one of the most interesting features of Earth, the ever-changing distribution of clouds. Why is this important? Well, clouds affect how much sunlight is being absorbed by the Earth and how much heat is escaping back into space, and thereby helps regulate the Earth temperature. Clouds influence local weather as well as control the planet's long-term climate. Cloud observations give scientists insight into how clouds are changing throughout the season and what impact this might have on our changing climate. NASA and other space agencies have a number of satellites orbiting Earth and collecting data about clouds. They give a big picture of climatic cloud effects, yet they struggle at times to provide detailed analysis of localized clouds. For example, satellites can only see the top of clouds. Some clouds are transparent and hard for satellites to detect. Some times it is difficult for satellites to distinguish clouds from snow or ice on the ground, and it is difficult for satellites to determine whether layers detected near the ocean are clouds or haze, which are layers of aerosols. That's why researchers are interested in ground truth data gathered by citizen scientists from the Earth's surface, looking at the clouds from underneath. So how does this work? You need to time your cloud observation within 15 minutes of a satellite flyover. You use the Globe Cloud app that tells you when the satellite is flying over, and that will also walk you through the data collection. And then you get outside, you observe the clouds in the sky, you enter all your information in the app, and you submit your observation. Very easy again. And here is a snapshot of the around 1,000 cloud observations that have been collected by the tourism industry in Antarctica to date. If your cloud observation was within 15 minutes of a satellite flyover and the satellite data is good, you will receive a match email. And in this email, you can see what the satellite saw compared to your observation. And this provides for a really interesting comparison and also for more education, because sometimes it can be that these observations are completely different. And this is not because one is wrong or the other one is right, because it could be, for example, that there are a lot of low clouds that you can see when you make your observation. So you cannot see the higher clouds that the satellite might see from above. But in the same way, it could be that there are a lot of high-level clouds, so the satellite cannot see all the low clouds that you could see in your observation when you look at the clouds from underneath. So this is why those combined observations are so important. The data that has been submitted by the tourism industry so far has already led scientists to change the data collection methodology, which I think is pretty amazing. At the end of a cloud observation, the app always asks you to upload photos from the sky from all cardinal directions. Normally, the app will automatically point you in the right cardinal direction to help you take the photo of your sky. But in photos submitted from the polar regions, scientists saw layers close to the horizon, and they couldn't really see if these layers were clouds or haze layers as a result of aerosols. So now the protocol has been changed, and in polar regions, you need to manually include the horizon in your photos so that scientists can collect more information about these layers close to the horizon. And then the last project that I want to talk about is called Beetles versus Stones, and it is taking place on South Georgia. So South Georgia has a very unique invertebrate community with several endemic species of, for example, beetles, spiders, and springtails. However, little is known about these animals, and several species may not even have been discovered or described at all. Unfortunately, human activities on South Georgia, in particular during the whaling times, have introduced invertebrates from around the world, and some of those have negative effects on native species. In particular, there are 2 species of invasive carabid beetles, and they seem to have recently become more abundant and widespread. These predatory beetles destabilize the food chain and prey on some of the same species as the endemic beetles do. So this project is aiming to assess the spread of the invasive beetles across South Georgia, as the current database is fairly old and most likely outdated. So again, the task is very simple. You need to find a rock, you need to turn this rock over, and then you need to observe, photograph, and record what you find under the rock in an app. And you can use an ID chart that the scientists provide, so you have an idea at what invertebrates you're looking at. And then after you finish, you have to put the rock back in place. So last year was actually the first year of this study, and the project scientists were also on location and conducted surveys together with the tourism industry. And here you can see already some of the first results, and they are already extremely interesting. So in black, you see areas where the invasive beetle was known from before 2022. And then all the beetles circled by a red line are the areas in which the invasive beetle has been recorded. And these are all new records, and this is just from last year. And then yellow areas are areas in which surveys have been done, but in which the beetle has not been recorded yet. So if you think about this, this is just the first year of the study. So imagine what this could bring in a few years' time. So why are these projects successful? Well, they are simple. They are easy to get started. The data protocols are straightforward but robust, so the data can be used for scientific purposes. They require easy to use and affordable equipment. The projects provide an opportunity to learn and to get involved in scientific research, something that is something that many enjoy, both the travelers and also the field staff. The projects provide feedback, which makes for a rewarding experience for contributing participants. Success of a citizen science project is actually strongly connected with project feedback. Other than a lack of time, it has been shown that one of the biggest reasons to stop participating in a project is when people don't hear back from that project. And the data is used to advance scientific knowledge. So now we could say, great, here's the solution to it all. But there are certain limitations of using citizen science for monitoring in the Antarctic, and I want to address a few of those. One is project complexity. For certain studies, more comprehensive data protocols are required, which simply cannot be done by citizen scientists to obtain reliable data. So you have to be very clear on what kind of project you want to use for citizen science. Some projects require spending extended periods of time at a certain location for data collection. And this is something that might not be practical for operators, as they often have only limited amounts of time at a given location. Some projects require either extensive or very delicate equipment that needs to be handled by experts. Citizen science is also not suitable for all project topics. So if you imagine that you want to deploy a 4-kilometer long deep sea mooring, for example, you need a specialized vessel, you need experts to do that. Or, for example, if your study is involving to tag whales, you also need to have experts to do that. And then, of course, the project can only happen at the sites that are visited by the operators. So it might be difficult to assess control sites. But despite all these limitations, if a project is designed right, the potential is huge. Because the expedition cruise industry provides a unique platform of opportunity. There are plenty of ships available, which allow for a large amount of data collection. Utilizing them to collect monitoring data extends the spatial and temporal coverage of data collection. And at the same time, it reduces the cost. And from personal experience, there's a willingness from the operators and their guides and also the travelers to make a positive impact, to help collect data. And overall, again, it enriches their experience. So in my opinion, if designed well, we can use citizen science projects successfully for monitoring studies in Antarctica, and we can contribute to the protection of Antarctica together. So thank you very much, and I'm happy if that leads into a very nice discussion.
Thank you very much, Annette. I think we have now time for questions and answers. So I'm just trying to get all the people that are there on the screen.
I can also stop sharing, might be easier.
Yeah. Thank you. If there are any questions, please raise your hand or use the chat.
Rita,
exactly. And then Michaela.
Thank you so much, Annette. That was really interesting, and I enjoyed that. I have a question. The projects you shared with us are very similar in structure, in my opinion. You let the guests take photos, and they get the data and the pictures up into an app. Could you give us an estimate how many projects that are not app-based are there, and if they could be described as successful?
Well, there are projects that use paper sheets, for example. A lot of them, they are moving towards apps because it's simply easier to get hold of the data. If you use paper sheets, it's sometimes not practical in the field. As we all know, polar regions can be very windy, so it's hard to keep hold of your piece of paper. And also, you would then have to scan those and then email them or forward them on to the project scientists. So they have found out that using apps is much easier. So there is a general trend to move towards some sort of app-based data collection. But there are other projects that collect physical samples, Fjord Fido, for example. So those physical samples need to be transported back. it is more complex logistically, but it is successful in the same way, as long as the project is engaging and has feedback and fits into an operator's itinerary.
Thank you.
Thank you. Michaela?
So my question is very easy, I guess. So who's paying for that? Is this from the scientific world developing the app, or where comes the money from establishing a project like this?
So that comes from the scientists. So the scientists, they need to find funding, but there are also operators that support scientists with funding. And I'm sure Damon will talk about this as I see his hand come up. So it is kind of both ways.
Okay.
Damon, you want to react on this?
Yes, I do. I'm sorry. I'm just for whatever reason the video camera's not turning on. I apologize. Hello everybody. Thank you for the presentation, Annette. It's very nice to see how Polar Citizen Science Collective citizen science work. I just wanted to add my role. I oversee the science of 2 expedition ships that are within both the Polar Citizen Science Collective's sort of partner organizations and more broadly with IATO. So the 2 points. One is, as was noted with the guest, how it adds value to the journeys. That in our experience, a majority of our guests traveling, this is not just adding sort of a value, it is how to remain connected to the place, and that there is a science communication message that is very powerful as well as the active involvement. And then secondly, the point about who pays for it. Typically, science costs money, and those that are spending money on science are always beholden to those that raise money. And certainly the business model that we use is that our guests are paying a substantial amount of money to be going, and that a small proportion of the money they pay is what's paying for the science program. And I think to a greater or lesser extent, that is the way that the private sector are using to make it cost neutral, putting the onus on the costing on the scientists unless they specifically have funding, for example, as Rita noted, developing app-based in terms of data mobilization. And certainly that there is an appetite for that. The guests are those that have the means to travel to Antarctica are normally pretty affluent, and that a small proportion of that money is relatively modest compared to the overall cost of the voyage. Adds up, lots add up to a very substantial amount of money to mobilize this kind of data. I'll stop there.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Damon, for this addition. I see a couple of questions in the chat. There is one. Are there any issues for the scientists in keeping up with the volume of data generated?
Yeah, that's a very good point. So for some of the projects which are fairly new, the data is not that much yet. But I think Ted from Happy World didn't expect the amount of data coming in. So he definitely can tell you a bit about this. But quite often what is happening is that the data is also going to bigger databases. So it is available for a wide range of scientists to download. So especially the Happy World data goes to OBIS, where it is available for others to work on the data as well. And that is definitely something that probably needs to be looked in. If this is scaled up bigger, then we need to find ways of where the data is stored, and then how others can access this as well. But for now, it's still manageable.
Okay, thank you. And the second question is, to what extent is scaling up projects a limiting factor? What do you see as the biggest opportunity to develop the connections between citizen science and monitoring into the future? And the third part of the question, and what sort of input might be useful from scientists in this regard? Sorry.
Well, I think, like I said, in terms of scaling up, for now there is no limitation. It all comes down to what kind of data you want and what you want to do with the data. I think there's a lot of opportunity to collecting what we discussed yesterday as the baseline data, whatever or wherever this baseline might be, but definitely helping to to look at things, to monitor, because the operators, the field guides in particular, they are the first ones to see changes happening because they're down there the entire season, year after year. And the useful input from scientists, I think, would be to come up with projects where they want data, because it is a massive opportunity. And I think quite often scientists are not aware that the industry is actually so happy and willing to help out, because collecting data from these areas is difficult, especially when it's supposed to be data collected throughout the entire season. And I think with all the successful projects that exist, that's something that the scientists can definitely sign off, that having data consistently throughout is important. So input from scientists would be, what kind of data do you need?
Okay. I have another question. Do you experience any kind of resistance of tourists that don't want to participate in that, or is it difficult to get people on board in practical terms?
So from my experience working on ships, I mean, it all comes down to how it is introduced, but there is surprisingly a huge amount of guests that don't even know that they want citizen science on a trip. So quite often they say that this was one of the best things of their voyage, but you will always have some travelers that are interested more than others. And that's the same with anything that you do. Not everyone is interested in kayaking, or not everyone is interested in the bird lectures. So there is enough variety there, and there is enough participation to make those projects successful.
Okay, thank you. There is another reply on your first question on the data in the chat. It says from Hanne Nielsen, thanks for the reply. The issue of where data sits and how available it is, and how capacity to process the data is provided, an important question for many researchers. Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, for now, it is basically the scientists, they develop the project. So they, of course, have first right to say what happens with the data. But typically at least within the polar regions and Antarctic tourism, after a certain amount of time, the data needs to be shared. So, some scientists, they upload it right away. Others, they might keep it to do their analysis and then share it with the bigger databases. This comes all down to how the project is designed, and that's up to the scientists for now.
Okay. Damon, you wanted to add something?
Yes, hello. Just regarding the funding and the question, Hannah's point is very well taken. The vast majority of the support, this is from Viking perspective, so one operator's perspective, we have a very strong science support focus. The vast majority of the funding that is required is not the in-kind field support, which is relatively straightforward. It is the off-ship costs. So we are spending 7-figure sums on support off-ship, including, I won't give an exhaustive list, but and that is the significant issue, is the data mobilization, the analysis, whatever, and that solely the in-kind support on ship is obviously useful, as Annette's highlighted, getting to those places. And most of the arrangements that we have as Viking, we've had off-ship costs as well as the on-ship support. And in fact, the only partner that does not request that is NOAA, because NOAA cannot receive those funding, but everybody else that can, academics, that is typically the conversation with us as a partner agency, as a partner entity in gathering these data.
Thank you for that. Just popped up a new question in the chat. How do the projects account for the differences in data collection intensity? Again, for example, changing numbers of participants from year to year. I imagine it's hard to use the data to measure change over time, in particular, for example, abundance of species.
Yeah, so that is, again, something that needs to be addressed by the project scientist, and a citizen science project needs to be developed in a way that it does account for that. And whereas citizen science projects are successful is something that Tom Hart touched upon yesterday as well, is that there's a ton of data coming in. So when you design a project like this, you need to be aware that there might be project outliers, or there will be project outliers, because everyone collects data slightly different, but there are designs that are robust enough so that if you have enough data coming in, you will still see the data trends. You just have to design your project to address those needs. And there's this wonderful field of statistics that has lots of answers to those questions. But this is something that the scientists need to consider when they develop the projects. So a citizen science project is different from maybe a traditional science project where you can rely that you will collect the data the same way every time, but it is definitely something that can be incorporated.
Thank you for this answer. Last round for questions. Otherwise, I would go on in the program if there is someone interested. No, I don't see any further input, also not in the chat. Annette, many thanks for this really interesting presentation. I assume we can share it after the event.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because yeah, you might want to reconsider some pictures as with data protection issues, but the content can be shared, I think. Yeah, okay. Many thanks again. I would now like to move on to, where is it? Yeah. To basically the input for the what was formerly known as parallel working groups and is now going to be one group. What we have done is basically started to develop the different monitoring elements along the concept we presented yesterday. This is an example for biofouling. So we have the drivers, the cruise ships are the drivers. We have the pressures, which is biofouling, and the impact, which are direct impacts, invasive species, or indirect loss of biodiversity. And then in the next column, we have the indicators along we could do the monitoring could be done. And then in the third column, there are the methods like statistics on ships, analysis of PBRs. For the cruise ships, for the pressures, it would be the growth, the indicator, the growth of micro and macro organism, and it can be done via visual surveys and other things. And then the impacts, establishment of invasive species for sampling. That's just an example. What we have done now is, and I'm not going to go through all of these rows, identified based on the literature survey we presented yesterday, the list of pressures and impacts, direct and indirectly, for the cruise ship activities. What we haven't done here, because that is basically where your expertise comes in, is identified, like in the screen before, the methods and the indicators. And here it would be really interesting to see what do you think can be done with existing methods, what could be done in close future, because methods or approaches are under development, and what is a long-term thing. And having said this, another question here in particular also to the ship operators and the other is, to which extent can you support these monitoring approaches on ships? What are the limitations here? What, in addition to what has been or what is done currently, can be achieved? Is it too much because there is a lot of activities already going on, and the staff is not able to cope with additional requests? So that's around what can we do with ships, or what can be monitored from a cruise ship. As I said, the questions are listed here again. So this is the focus of today, and I really would appreciate that we focus the discussion today along these questions, and not move to some general aspects we had already yesterday. So yeah, please go ahead and share your views, ideas on this. I got one chat message. This example raises some of the same issues discussed last night. Why would we only monitor these impacts from cruise ships and not ships going into Antarctic waters? Good question. I think some of it can be monitored for all ships. But if you don't have enough people on the ship because it's something different doing there, fishing, then it might be an issue. Rita.
I can react to that question in the chat. Thanks for the question. We focus on it because it's the focus of a project that we try to find the parts the tourism industry and the tourist ships are playing. But of course, there are things going on in the bigger picture. The parties at ATCM level, CEP level, are currently trying to establish a monitoring framework for environmental monitoring in whole Antarctica. And as you can imagine, this is a thing that will take a lot of time, and that is a very extensive process. And when all the parties are involved, maybe our contribution could be made there. And but for now, we wanted to focus on the tourist input. So thanks for the question, though.
Thank you, Rita. Anyone else? Damon again. Always welcome.
Hello, I'm sorry. I make various interventions because this is a subject that we at Viking have thought about for the last 4 years and are implementing on 2 vessels, but I'm conscious that there's many people in this conversation. As we are sort of workshopping this in plenary, I just want to offer some reflections on what we do with our vessels in terms of a whole suite of different monitoring. As well as citizen science, there is also a lot of passive monitoring that is possible. Automated telemetry about oceanographic monitoring on a number of the impacts and or potential impacts, pressures and drivers that you highlighted just a moment ago. Euphemistically known as ferry boxes. That's automated oceanography. So that is sucking water up from the ship as they're going along. And so a whole variety of different parameters that are relevant, including aspects of pollution, aspects of environmental change, oceanography. Secondly, as was noted...
Damon, can I interrupt here? Is this something you are currently implementing on 2 ships? Was that correct?
Yes, that's correct. We have 2 expedition vessels within the IATO fleet. We've taken a specific niche that we've identified as being about being very strongly scientifically engaged. But what I'm highlighting are things that I think within reason most vessels could implement, depending on, of course, there's a bit of a capital cost initially in terms of installation of instruments. And then secondly, as was noted a few minutes ago, the data management is the second key factor. But if one was to take the view, for example, as expressed with SUS, the Southern Ocean Observing System, where there is ships of opportunity of going in different places, if we're looking at existing monitoring, I think we should look initially at what can be done passively. Secondly, as highlighted in our keynote, that there's a whole variety of observing that can be done. Well, of course, apps with specific PIs doing particular taxa, but observational information, opportunistically taken, is the basis of monitoring, not just in Antarctica. I mentioned yesterday that I spent several years at the World Conservation Monitoring Centre as part of UN Environment here in Cambridge, and 55% of all biodiversity monitoring is bird data, because there's a lot of people that like observing birds. And uniquely, as a taxon, a citizen scientist birder is not called a citizen scientist, they're just called a birder. Because if they're good at collecting information, then they are. It doesn't matter what their profession is. And I think that maybe scaling that to other taxa would be another natural way in which more broadly monitoring could be collected. Thirdly, there's a lot of early indicators of environmental change that can be gathered from the water. I'm minded of, for example, microplastics. That the same sampling can be done, whether it be following standard regimes and so on. We at Viking are a partner of a consortium under the name Nautilus, that's Norwegian, which is looking at low-tech solutions to looking at a whole variety of marine pollution in Antarctica and elsewhere. And that has EU funding, which the data managers that manage the SUS data, that manage Copernicus data, that manage EMODNet data, are all one consultancy that are funded by the EU. And so the data mobilization can be organized through that consultancy. And so that could reduce the cost. Now, I could carry on, and I'm conscious there's lots of people listening here. I could talk about this. This is what I do every day. I'd be welcome offline or in breakout or whatever, or share with what it is that we do as an exemplar. It's not saying ours is the only way, but we have put a lot of effort into working out how a ship of opportunity can maximize the environmental monitoring capacity when down south.
Thank you very much. There is a question in the chat which is more technical. Could you please circulate the presentation so we can look through the slides within the questions and the examples during the discussions? Is that referring to the presentation I gave or Annette? That's Rita, you're nodding, but
I think it's about your presentation.
okay, then
it's
not online. No, but I can share it again. Or Franzi, can you share it? Because I otherwise don't see. It's hard to moderate when half of the screen is blocked with a presentation.
It's kind of hard to discuss when you can't see the information.
Yeah, that's true.
In the table because it's so extensive.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Any other reactions on this? No one. Any kind of reactions from the colleague? Oh, here, yeah. Amanda, I was just asking if Yato wants to say something here. So it's perfectly that you raised your hand. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Thomas, and hi everyone. It's Amanda Lennis from IATO here, and I've been enjoying listening to the discussions. There's lots going on in my head. I haven't made any particular notes, but I just wanted to intervene a little bit. I think there's, as many of you know, there's a lot to look at through the CEP work as well. The UK in Finland submitted a paper that last year that actually nicely outlined a lot of the monitoring work that's currently being done, especially on the peninsula. And our operators do support a lot of that monitoring. Damon mentioned some projects that they support, and we have other operators that support that as well. In the last, at our last annual meeting in April, IATO formalized a science support working group, actually. So they have several tasks at hand in order to support IATO's work. But one of those is providing assistance to IATO in developing a mechanism to aggregate information on the scientific work that's being performed on the IATO vessels. So there's a few that's to help us internally to aggregate that work. And Gina mentioned yesterday some of the projects that are ongoing, but certainly as a fleet of opportunity and work going on, there's a lot of potential there. And then I noticed that you used the biofouling as an example, and I mentioned the CEP. So within that framework, of course, IATA vessels are all subject to IMO regulations. So there is a lot of discussion because biofouling is a really important topic for us. And you'll know, especially with recent reports submitted to CEP about climate change, that this is not something that's going to go away. It's going to, becomes increasingly important over time. So it's really important to us. And so as such, we agreed on work last year with CONNAP to come back to the table about biofouling practices. Actually doing monitoring work as such has been discussed at length within IATO, and there are challenges linked to that would need a lot more ongoing discussion logistically. So that is one, that needs a bit more discussion. But I think, I think that's probably it for now. I know I'm forgetting stuff. I need to keep my notes a little bit updated, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Amanda. And it's not that people are queuing to raise their hand. So if something comes in your mind, please feel free to come back again. I have a comment in the chat which says we still seem to have a causality issue and a prioritization issue. I agree with Damon that we need to widen the taxa and be looking into integrated monitoring, and we also need to be using risk assessment process to identify priorities for monitoring. Yes, the second half of this statement is something we are to some extent having in the project or are considering in the project. As I said in the presentation yesterday, we are currently developing this approach further. It is based on biodiversity monitoring approaches that we have seen around the world, but it's not ready yet and not at the stage where we can share it with you. But it's definitely an issue we are aware of. Anyone else? Hanne.
Yeah, thank you. I guess just to reiterate some of the points that have been raised already about that simplicity being really important. And this is something that came up in yesterday's discussions as well, making it really easy to collect whatever data that is. So the automated point is a useful one. But then also having a clear data management plan as well, the same format of data for ease of collation, which Suze has been mentioned already. Of course, we're doing a lot of work in that area. And that helps again with that point that was mentioned around the wraparound for the projects, not just the gathering, but then the synthesizing back home, seeing what does it mean, how should we understand it, and how do we use that to inform the decision making.
Thank you. Any reaction to that? Any additions? Okay, I have the feeling that probably the presentation by Annette was more an highlight than the discussion, which is fine for me. If there are no further urgent comments, what I'm missing a bit is the issue of other operators and their will to support scientific monitoring. But I think no one wants to say something here again except Damon. No, Yato, you said, Amanda, you said as well. Yeah, that's clear.
It's okay.
We
I see
can't hear-
Gina's put her hand up. I wasn't sure if you meant other operators as in IAT, like tourism operators, or the Antarctic community activity as in a whole, you know, national Antarctic programs and everyone sense. I was a bit lost on that. Sorry.
No, sorry, that was too wider than ER to operator. Sorry. Yeah. Okay.
Wait, I got a proposition. I think the presentation you were giving with the extensive tables might have been a bit too quick to get the whole hold of it. Might I propose that we make it available, at least the slides with the table, via email or
We can upload it on the
our
website
website.
after the
Maybe
call.
we can take a short break of about 10 minutes for that, so that people can have a look at it, maybe.
Yeah.
And I think it could be fruitful to not just stop here, but to have a look at the things that we found in the project already, and then that we would like to have a conversation on. If someone has input for this, I think we shouldn't waste the 2 hours that we set for this meeting.
That was no. Yeah, we best thing is, Michi, can you upload this quickly on the website?
Yes, I can. Did you make any changes, or is it the version we had on Teams?
No, it's the version we.
Okay, so give me 2 minutes and I will put the
Yeah,
link.
but we can have a general break until 11 minutes, 20 past wherever you are. I hope I don't have time zones here. Yeah, so it's 20 past whatever time you are, and we could come back, and then everybody should be able to have a look at the slides as well. See. Okay. Okay. Welcome back. After this short break, I hope most of you had the time to look at the presentation. I see one hand raised by Gina.
Can I go ahead, Tomas?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, no. So for those I haven't met, my name is Gina Greer. I'm the executive director at IATO. And I think it was helpful to pause and give us an opportunity to look at that list and spend a little bit more time with it. The one thing that jumped out at me in relation to the list, and there are a lot of good things in there that should be considered and explored a little bit further. But I think it would also be helpful for there to be a pause and to go back, especially as it relates to some of the things early on in relation to cruise ship impact. It would be helpful to go back to the IMO guidelines in relation to those. The first one that you have on that list regarding ballast water, ballast exchange is not allowed under the IMO polar guidelines for the cruise vessels below 60 degrees. So ballast water for us would not be a consideration. It probably should be a consideration for other visitors to Antarctica. And I understand, Rita, you guys have taken that out of this, but that actually is something that should be explored there. But for cruise vessels, that should not be a consideration. And then for other elements that are in there, like the littering and the garbage, there are some very strict guidelines that are currently in place as well regarding where that exchange could occur, specifically the 12 miles off of the land rule. So when we consider those things, I think all of that needs to be factored in terms of what the current framework is, because for the cruise industry or the expedition industry, I wouldn't say it's a free-for-all and everybody's dumping and, you know, everybody's exchanging. That's not what is happening. And so if there are indicators put out for it, because you are trying to focus on the cruise industry, you will probably grab things that other visitors are contributing to. So I would give that some consideration. The other thing that would probably be helpful as you guys move through this process is just to also understand some of the changes that have happened with a lot of the vessels. Because one of the things like anchoring, which I agree is a concern as it relates to the benthic environment, a lot of the newer vessels now have dynamic positioning. So for the cruise industry, that's becoming less and less of a concern because of dynamic positioning and the need not to drop an anchor because they're allowed to monitor things. So I know Amanda has her hand up as well, but that's the one thing I would caution as you guys move forward is going back to those requirements or under IMO Polar Code, because we're holding our operators to it and making sure they're following those things. So that might mitigate some of those concerns and help you guys focus on what may be some things that are specifically tourist related that you may want to consider spending more time with in the future versus the larger net.
Thank you for that. And handing over to Amanda now.
Oh, thank you very much. And then just to add to Gina's comments as well, Gina commented some good stuff there. I just, in terms of wider monitoring, you maybe are aware of this, but for example, IATO does already participate in marine debris monitoring. So that is actually part of the CAMLR marine debris program, which was set up to decades ago to monitor for fishing debris. So we have an opportunistic data form in our field operations manual that comes from CAMLR, and we ask our field staff to partake in that. And then the other thing that we do, so the point being is, you know, thinking about wider monitoring that's ongoing. The other one that just sprang into my mind is we also report whale strikes to the IWC as well. So yeah, so it's yeah, there's a couple of additional comments there. So like Gina said, it's helpful to have a look at some of these sort of examples to get us going a little bit.
Indeed, thank you very much for this information. Anyone else? I mean, some of the things on the list are definitely also like all the air emission difficult to yes, subtract from other emissions for sure. So as I said, there is at the moment no prioritization also, so it's just the full list, and the exercise here is really to collect what's going on. Yeah, so if there are any other comments on this. I don't see anyone. There is also no comment in the chat so far. Oh, yeah, Ricardo.
Yes, good afternoon or good morning for everybody. My name is Ricardo Roure from the Antarctic and Southern Ocean Coalition. I think it's a very interesting discussion, and I would like to highlight the issue of monitoring has been discussed in the Antarctic Treaty System for many years, starting, as I recall, from a 1992 or something meeting of experts on monitoring. And in many ways, it hasn't been resolved entirely yet, right? But when we come to the discussion of looking into tourism monitoring, I think some of the discussion highlight the need to develop objective monitoring methods. Tourism not only as a platform to document human impact from any source, but also as a potential source of impact. We need to kind of get a grasp of how that equation works. And one thought I had, just listening to the recent comments made by Gina and Amanda, was perhaps we can learn also from CAMLR systems, that is from the convention and commission that looks into Antarctic marine living resources in the Antarctic, meaning essentially the fisheries industry. They have a number of regulations to comply with to manage a very complex industry, but they also have a compliance committee that examines how operations are performed. So the idea is not necessarily to shame legal fishing operators for lack of compliance on some issues, but just to keep the system going and to learn from the experience. And of course, it is the legal kind of the legal side or the bad actors, but that's something entirely different. So I think perhaps we need to, if we are looking into tourism as a potential source of impact, we need to develop methods that look into the activity, into compliance, as well as into potential environmental impacts. And there has to be a degree of objectivity to that. And for instance, in the case of Camilla, one of the tools they use is independent onboard observers for many of their ships. And I know that IATA also has its own observation system for its members, but of course the idea is it has to be some sort of objectivity and looking from outside the system. And I'll leave it for now. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Any additional, Rita?
Yes, thank you for the comments so far, especially from Ayato and Ricardo. It's always so helpful. I generally have the feeling that there is so much data and so much valuable experience and so much lessons out there that we can learn from. And from my national competent authority perspective, it's just hard to for me to get all this together. This is some of the reason why we initiated the project, because there is so much out there and we're interested in everything, and it's just hard to lay the hands on all the data that's already existing, and it would be great to bring the stuff together and to see what we can learn from it so far, and if we could utilize it in like an Antarctic-wide or peninsula-wide monitoring, even not only on the touristic perspective, but also further down the road. So thank you for the comments. We will look into that.
Indeed, thank you very much. Anything else that we can take into consideration? Attila.
Hello, I hope you hear me loud and clear. So just my 2 cents for the table regarding the drivers. I see some of the drivers as listed as emissions, such as particulate matter and heavy metals. I think it would be wise to consider thinking about the polyaromatic hydrocarbons as a pollutant group, which is a good indicator of anthropogenic pollution, since they are either originated from combustion of fossil fuels or the petrogenic sources.
Okay, thank you for that. So what you say is it can replace a couple of other indicators we are considering.
No, not replacing, but just in addition. For example, heavy metals.
Okay.
In addition to the heavy metals, there may be also a group of polyaromatic hydrocarbons to monitor.
Any additional? I think the number of participants with a black screen is basically increasing. Rita, I'm not sure if we should host people here longer than needed. Amanda.
Hi there. Sorry, I was going to say take the floor again, but that's not quite what's happening. But Rita, that was a good point about coming back to the national competent authorities. We do encourage our operators to have strong relationships with the national competent authorities. And just a reminder too that of course there's all the post-visit report forms which report activity, and the competent authorities have those. And of course that goes back to the Treaty Secretariat. So there's those data as well that would be a very valuable resource. Thank you.
Okay, noted. Okay, last chance. No. I will see how many people I have to refuse when I close the meeting, no, resend to the waiting room when I close the meeting like yesterday, because then you realize people are online but not physically in the room. Anyway, many thanks so far for the helpful input. As yesterday, if there is anything you want to share with us, please feel free, send an email. Whatever, yeah, send an email is the easiest thing, I think. For tomorrow, we are focusing on the land use on the land activities. We do a similar exercise as today. The slides are already online, so you scroll down to the tables we have prepared for from slide 27 and 28. So you can have a bit of time for preparation. We will also have a keynote by Osama Mustafa on possible field methods to monitor tourism or visitor impact on the Antarctic environment. So I'm looking forward to see you tomorrow, and maybe as a challenge or as a goal, let's put it that way, as a goal, it would be great if more than 10 people finally interact here and not just having their being online but not participating here. Any kind of criticism is also helpful. So if you think that what we are doing is not super helpful for anyone, then please express that as well. In this context, having said that, thank you. Have a good morning, evening, afternoon, night, wherever you are placed, and let's meet tomorrow again. Thank you very much.
Thanks from my side. Bye bye.
Thank